All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, thanks for joining us here on the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Braden Moles, Keith Maisano. We are talking the all-decade team for the Buckeyes of the 2010s. We recently talked about the offense. Now we're going to jump right into the defense. If you haven't seen the pieces, I'll be sure to link them in the comments section, so be sure to check it out. Let's just get right to defensive end. Ohio State, especially under Larry Johnson, has had some tremendous defensive ends come through. There was good reason for debate, but surprisingly enough, we all came right to it with Chase Young and with Joey Bosa. But, there are some other guys that could have been there too.
So, obviously, Chase Young is the, unanimous first ballot, whatever, kind of voted in there. Because obviously you've seen his dominance over his career at Ohio State, specifically last season. And then, obviously, with Joey and Nick Bosa, in terms of skill level, to me it's kind of a toss-up. Do you want Joey? Do you want Nick? You take either of them. But I think the thing that gives Joey the nod over Nick is that, Nick only played 3 games in his final season with, I believe Joey played some 38 games or something like that. So when, I think Nick may have even been the more talented Bosa, but, Joey had those stats, over the 3 full years of playing that kind of gives him the nod here.
Yeah, kind of just jumping off of, the idea between the two Bosas. I think if Nick maybe doesn't get hurt in his final year with Ohio State, because that kind of, ruined kind of his ability to kind of pass his brother as far as statistics go, because I think a lot of people, I think even Joey included, said that his brother was ahead of where he was at the age that, as young as he was. So I think that, I just think that Chase Young obviously is maybe the easiest selection in this entire picking of this team, but Joey Bosa, I think, was good enough to easily slide in that second slot just because of the lack of legacy that Nick Bosa was able to leave.
I don't know. I see your defensive end, and I raise you punter, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And we also always hear this situation, too, where the younger brother is always supposed to be ahead of the older brother. We saw it with the Borens. Everybody said, well, Jacoby's going to be the best of the Borens. That could be up for debate. I think Jacoby was a hell of a player. We're really getting out of our decade at this point, so I will kind of bring it back around to defensive tackle. We go with a couple of guys from the past here with Jonathan Hankins and Michael Bennett. 2 guys that I certainly had an opportunity to see play as I've been doing this forever and a day. Jonathan Hankins was a guy maybe not highly sought after as a recruit. All he did was come in, reshape his body, come in and dominate. And then Michael Bennett, a guy out of Centerville, a real thinking man's player, very cerebral. Was probably one of my favorite interviews of all time covering this team, and was a tremendous player. I really thought he would probably have more of an NFL career than he did, but very fortunate to see him play the college game.
Yeah, and you got guys, that's one of the toughest positions I think in the sport is being able to clog up the lane. You have guys who did it both very effectively, and with Jonathan Hankins with the NFL career he had, and then I just think, we didn't get to see the guys like you got to see them, but I just think that the fact that we know who they are, I can definitely point to things that they've done just statistically. They were very versatile, definitely Michael Bennett for sure, but the names, and then I think that the fact that we all said the same people just really points to the fact that how great their careers really were.
It's interesting. Of the all-decade team, this is probably the only position where all of the players we have are from 5+ years in the past. So, it is, like Keaton said, it is interesting kind of the impact they've left and that we're still talking about them to this day. But I think, the last few years, there have been great defensive tackles that have come through Ohio State to help anchor the defensive line, but none of them have been as dominant as Bennett and Hankins were when they were at Ohio State. So I think it's totally deserving for them, even after, 6 or 7 years, that we still consider them among the best of the decade.
Let's just jump right over to linebacker. We kind of have a mixture. We don't have guys right up, from the current day on this list, but certainly some guys that were mentioned in the discussions. Ryan Shazier, Raekwon McMillan, those 2 were unanimous between the 3 of us. we ended up giving the nod to Joshua. Don't call him Josh. Joshua Perry. You can check out his work on Big Ten Network. Really went round and round between specifically him and Darren Lee. Two very different positions, two very different players. Darren Lee has him in terms of NFL service, draft pick or whatnot, but personally speaking for me, I felt that, the nod went to Joshua Perry playing a more traditional linebacker position, saw more time on the field and whatnot, but it was close. I mean, I've known Darren Lee, I've known the Lees for years and years, so, if this gets back to him, I'm sure I'll catch a little grief, but, I've known Josh for a long time too.
Yeah, kind of how I went with Curtis Samuel over KJ Hill, just because of the versatility, is kind of why I went Darren Lee over Joshua Perry here. Even though Perry definitely is the more true linebacker, has the tackles to back up his career. But Darren Lee, it just felt like when he made a play, it was a big play. It was an effective play. I mean, we all remember the touchdown against Michigan that kept Ohio State's championship hopes alive when they won the national championship. And then the statistics: 16 tackles for loss in 2014, and then 11 tackles for loss in 2015. Pair that with 11 career sacks. I mean, it just felt like he would just make the big play, and he just had great instincts for the position. So that's why I had to give him the nod.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you say about Lee. I mean, I think obviously the impact he had on the field, but, as I was kind of debating, I originally had Lee slotted for my team as well, but as we were kind of discussing this and debating it, I started to lean a little more towards Joshua Perry because, like Kevin said, you have that longevity of how long he played, and then, how often he was on the field as that main man on the defense. So I think, Lee may have had bigger impacts in the big moments for Ohio State, but, back to my argument about, JT Barrett and KJ Hill, with that kind of, everything they've done during their career, I think the nod should go towards Perry for kind of everything he did during his time at Ohio State.
And this one will be fun for fans to debate, so I'm looking forward to hearing your comments over in the Horseshoe Lounge. Let's jump to safety. I felt this one was pretty simple just based on how strong the top two were. I mean, we're talking about BIA. We're talking about Ohio State being the true DBU out there. Apologies to LSU and everybody else who claims it. We know better. Von Bell, Malik Hooker.
Yeah, and Malik Hooker is maybe the most instinctual safety I've ever seen come through Ohio State, at least just in my time of being alive, which isn't that long. But I just remember it just felt like he made a lot of plays, 3 touchdowns in his final season with Ohio State, and then you see what he's doing at the NFL level, so there's just no drop-off in his skill set. And then with Von Bell, I think Kevin made a good point, just kind of like that new type of safety, be able to make some plays. I mean, he had 6 interceptions in 2014, and it just feels like the guys who played on that 2014 team kind of have a special place in a lot of people's hearts just because of that team being able to win it all. So there's a lot of players from that team, obviously, that are on this all-decade team.
Yeah, when you look at Hooker and Bell, it's just, I think some other considerations that could have been made, you have Jordan Fuller, who played, a few years to Ohio State, who obviously recently graduated, and I think, when you look at all of these guys, like Keenan said, the stats are kind of in favor of Hooker and Bell with those interception numbers and, kind of the pedigree of the teams they played on. So I don't think it's an insult to any of the other guys that aren't on this, that we didn't put on the team here. It's, Hooker and Bell just made such a big impact when they were here.
Now we jump to corner, probably one of the most hotly debated positions. Ohio State's had just such a run of first-round type of corners. We can only put 2 on there. We went with Denzel Ward, Jeff Okudah. I'm going to jump in first. Denzel Ward went number 4 overall in the draft. If you believe a lot of the mocks right now and believe that the Detroit Lions won't make a move, Jeff Okudah could go number 3 overall in the draft. I mean, we are talking about elite of the elite, and it's really hard sometimes to judge a position where the better and more respected you are, the less amount of action you see. You don't throw at these top guys. So, you go and you look at tackle numbers, you go and you look at PBUs and whatnot, and the numbers may not be there. So you can't necessarily just do a scan and be like, well, I got this on lockdown because I looked at these stats. You have to really see these guys. And, that's not to take anything away from the guys that we didn't mention.
Yeah, and then I think you went with Marshawn Lattimore, and me and Braden both went with you went with Marshawn, and then I went with Jeff Okudah, and so did Kevin. But I think we leaned towards Jeff Okudah just because of the way his career, the way he just got better and better each year in his 4 years with Ohio State, or his 3 years with the redshirt freshman. But you have Marshawn Lattimore, who's there for 2, And just like Kevin said, it's hard to tell with how these guys really are doing when they're not getting thrown at, because if they're not getting thrown at, they're doing their job. But I just went with Jeff Okudah just because of the way that he was able to improve to such a high level. And then Denzel Ward, just the way he played in his final season with Ohio State, just the play that sticks out to me is that block punt against Penn State. Just like a great play that really turned that game around. So I think there's just so many guys in that secondary, and that's why Ohio State hangs their hat on, calls himself BIA, and it really showed just how difficult it was to pick these guys.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think, obviously, I don't need to add anything about Ward. I mean, we were all in agreement there, so there's not really much question there. But so I had Marshawn Lattimore, and I even, obviously, it's Jeff Okudah that's on our team, but I'm still sticking with Marshawn Lattimore for mine because, I think – just personally, I think he was the most talented corner, other than Denzel Ward that played during the 2010s. Just watching him play, just how dominant he was. So that's just my opinion. But I think when you look at Jeff Okudah, I think the struggle for me watching, like Kevin had alluded to, when you have these best guys, they're not getting thrown to that often. So when you're watching them, it's difficult to really assess how well they're playing. So I think that's just a little difficult for me when assessing Okudah. But I think I agree with the point, though, about how, with Okudah being here for three years, you're able to watch him kind of improve over the years. So I'm fine with where we ended up on that.
And at risk of leaving some names off the list, I mean, we also looked at Garyon Conley, Bradley Roby. There certainly are a lot of names there. So we've gone through the defense. We're going to quickly fly through the special teams. Not that we don't love specialists, but we're going to go kind of in reverse order from how we listed our team. We're going to go with returner Jalen Marshall. He was lightning and he was a heart attack. He was both at the same time. He had games like Indiana where he was all over the place, and then he had games where he'd put the ball on the deck and people would, he certainly probably took years off of people's lives.
Yeah, I think that roller coaster kind of career for him is kind of why he's on this team, is because other guys you just don't really remember. You remember Jalen Marshall just because he was either going to give you a heart attack, like Kevin said, or he's going to make you happy. And really, I remember being in the stadium for that Indiana return. It's just really the only one that sticks out because Ohio State, as far as as great as they are at other positions, they just can't seem to get that return guy since Ted Ginn days. So yeah, Jalen Marshall was easily the choice for me.
We were all in agreement on the punter, Cameron Johnson, who's getting it done with the Eagles now. I mean, he was the first Australian punter at Ohio State, and he certainly left a legacy.
Yeah, averaging nearly 45 yards per punt during his career. You all know how much I love my main man, Drew Chrisman, but when looking at Johnston's entire career, it's hard to deny that he was clearly the best punter in the 2010s for Ohio State.
And then we wrap up with one position that we did have some debate, and that's place kicker. We ended up going with Blake Hobbiel. It was between him and Sean Nurnberger. I think specifically for me, the thing that put Blake over Sean was not even the fact that Sean ended up getting passed over for Tyler Durbin. I mean, to his credit, he came back, but I did not like Sean's range. He was, outside of 40, was a bit of a liability. Now we're in a day and age where Ohio State certainly is not going for a lot of field goals, not going for those long ones. You end up in that 4-down territory. So, it was an interesting debate, but, a lot of credit to Blake Hobbiel.
Yeah, and Hobbiel right now is the top, the most accurate kicker in Ohio State history with 82.1%. And then right behind him is Mike Nugent, who a lot of people really point to. If you're thinking of a kicker from Ohio State, you think of Nuge. So, yeah, Hobbiel with the kick against Northwestern is really going to be something that will probably cement his legacy as a kicker at OSU.
Agree with what we said, disagree with, be sure to let us know in the comments or over in the Horseshoe Lounge of Buckeye Grove. We really had a lot of fun with this whole process. We hope to see your teams as well, and I think that's going to do it. So for Keaton and for Braden and for myself, thanks for listening to BIA, and we will catch you on the next show.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.